Welcome, everybody. My name is Mr. Abbott, and today I'll be talking about building suspense in your narrative. The first question you might have is, what is suspense? And so it's defined as a state or feeling of excited or anxious uncertainty about what may happen. And so suspense is when you're on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen next in a story. Is the character going to live? Are they going to die? Are they going to succeed? Are they going to fail? Is the team going to win the game or lose the game? It's when you're like hooked and you just want to know what happens next. That is suspense. And so I would see if you can answer this question. Can you think of what makes a story suspenseful? Can you think of any movies that you've seen that were really suspenseful? And can you think of at least one thing from that movie that made you really feel that feeling of suspense? Take a minute and go ahead and pause this video for a minute if you need to. Now, the thing I want you to remember is that suspense is really the opposite of boring. If you want to have a story that's not boring, that's widely accepted as interesting, suspense is really your best tool. It'll make your audience want to keep reading, listening, or watching to your story. And so, if you really want to make sure that your story is going to be something that people will enjoy reading, suspense is just a really powerful tool for doing so. And so, here are some of the techniques that you can use to build suspense in your story. Let's see if I can make this a little bit smaller. Oh well. Uh, the first is going to be let the reader see both points of view, both of the protagonist or the antagonist. And you'll kind of see this in horror films sometimes, where you're like watching a film and you know that the bad guy is in the other room, you know that the killer is in the other room, and you're like, no, don't go into that room. He's waiting for you. This is that technique. And so it's really what's known as the third person omniscient. If you're looking for specific narrative terms, it's when the reader can see everybody's point of view in the story and they know everything that's going on and they know when the protagonist is about ready to walk into something really kind of dangerous. And so I put the picture of Jaws here because there are many points in the movie Jaws where we knew that there was a shark in the water, and we see, innocent kids swimming in the water, enjoying themselves, people swimming in the water, and we know there's a shark in the water, and it just makes the viewer be like, "Oh no, get out of the water! You have to get on the beach. Be safe." Now, once again, there's another term here called dramatic irony, and that's when you know something that the character in the story does not. And dramatic irony is one way to build suspense. You show your reader the bad things that are going to happen to your protagonist or characters before they happen, and your reader will naturally kind of be like, oh no, no. All right, another technique for building suspense is to just create a truly heroic protagonist that the reader will identify with. So create a character that the reader is going to want to see succeed. And this is going to make depend on how well you develop your characters. But you want to create somebody who is that the reader will look up to, somebody who the reader will identify with. If you make somebody that the reader doesn't like, they're going to be like, I don't care. I don't care if they win. I don't care if they lose. I don't care if they live. I don't care if they die. You want to make somebody who the reader really cares about. One of the biggest ways that you can build suspense in your story is to just make the protagonist work against a ticking clock. Just put that timer in there. Have that countdown to something bad happening. This will instantly add suspense. And I'm sure as soon as I put this one up there, you recognize this one. You see this one a lot in film, where the timer is counting down and the protagonist only has a limited amount of time to do what they need to do. And also, the antagonist, meanwhile, should seem like they have plenty of time. Like they're just waiting, they're relaxing, they have no worries in the world, but the protagonist is having to get something done very quickly. You also want to give the protagonist some kind of high stakes, right? And so, whatever they're trying to accomplish, make sure that failure to do so is going to really cost them. Here in Lord of the Rings, delivering the ring to Mordor will save the world, literally. The goblins and orcs of of Sauron will conquer the entire world unless these hobbits are successful. And so oftentimes the stakes are life or death. They could be the success of a team or the failure of a team. Sometimes it'll be somebody getting the money they need, or sometimes it'll be, especially in like more romantic comedies, winning or losing the love of their life. Uh, you want some kind of high stakes in there for the protagonist. It's also a good idea to create dilemmas that force the protagonist to choose between his or her needs and somebody else's. And so I've included here, for those of you who've seen The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda. The Mandalorian was a bounty hunter who was doing just fine by himself until one day he finds Baby Yoda and needs to take care of Baby Yoda, or chooses to take care of Baby Yoda, right? And so he could succeed much more easily in his life and in his wants if he was to stop taking care of Baby Yoda, but he chooses to keep doing so. And so because he doesn't want an innocent person to suffer, and so this is another thing that can make the story more suspenseful. Now, another thing to do is to pile on problems or complications so the protagonist has a lot to deal with besides the upcoming confrontation with the antagonist. And so, one of the ways you can do this is by putting a contagonist in your story. And so, a contagonist is just kind of like that bumbling ally that hangs around with the protagonist. Usually, they're well meaning. Sometimes they could be on the antagonist side and trying to derail the protagonist, but most oftentimes they're just somebody who doesn't quite have the same skills as the protagonist, and the protagonist is constantly having to take care of them or kind of watch out for them. I put this picture here because Bulma is kind of a classic Dragon Ball Z contagonist. While she has her own skills and can take care of herself from time to time, she's constantly getting into trouble. And either Goku or Gohan is frequently having to take care of Bulma. And it just makes it a little bit more suspenseful because not only are you worried about the protagonist, but you're worried about this other person who's getting involved and may come to harm. Now, it's essential that your antagonist have the ability to defeat your protagonist. And here we have a picture of Superman coming face to face with some kryptonite, right? Normally, Superman is indestructible. There's not really much that can hurt Superman. And so it's not really that interesting a lot of times when Superman fights because you know he's going to be fine. But all of a sudden you give the antagonist some kryptonite and you know that Superman can be defeated, it becomes much more tense. And so really your antagonist has to be somehow equal to your protagonist. Otherwise it won't be that frightening and it won't build that much suspense. It's kind of like I know in a lot of movies and film I see characters who have what are called plot armor, and plot armor just means that the characters are needed by the show. They can't die or the show will end. And for me, that always kills the suspense because I'm like, well, I know they're going to be fine. They're not going to kill this character, so I don't know why I'm worried because I know how this is going to turn out. Whereas the shows where I'm like, oh, this person may actually die. The antagonist has the ability to destroy them. It makes it much more suspenseful. Forcing the protagonist to work against long odds as well is another way of building suspense. If it seems like success is almost impossible, then it becomes really, really suspenseful because you're like, wait, how are they going to do this? How can they possibly succeed? When you see a roving horde of zombies and your protagonist is in the middle, you're just like, how are they going to get out? This doesn't even seem possible. And it makes it really suspenseful. Now, another thing you can do is you can let the reader know what the protagonist fears most. And I put Batman on here because we know he's afraid of bats. Um, or you might not know that, but now you know. Batman is afraid of bats, by the way. He took the symbol of the bat for himself to like kind of take away its power. But if you let the reader know what the protagonist fears, then when it comes down to like the final confrontation with the antagonist, now you can bring that fear in, and then you're worried like, oh my gosh, will the protagonist be able to overcome their fears? And it can make it more suspenseful because you know that they have like this weakness. Um, and so I guess you could say just giving your protagonist a critical weakness as well would be kind of a similar technique as this. But just have something that you know that the protagonist is going to struggle to face, and it could be a great weapon to use against them. Now, another thing you can do is just play on universal fears. You can add those to the story. Darkness, spiders, snakes, heights, tornadoes, basements, rising waters. These are things that people just generally find scary. So if you put them in a story, your reader is instantly going to be like, "Oh man, spiders? No, thank you." There's this movie called Cliffhanger. It came out in the 1990s, where really they're just playing on people's fear of heights the entire time. This was definitely using the universal fear of heights to build suspense in that film. Another thing you can do is kill somebody close to the protagonist. And what this shows is that the protagonist is not safe. Somebody near to them has died, and they can also die. And so this is another way of showing that the antagonist has the ability to destroy the protagonist. And here I just put the original Star Wars when Luke comes home to his family farm to find that his aunt and uncle had been killed. We learn that the Empire is a serious business, and they will destroy people, and it makes you more worried for the characters of the story. And then finally, if you have more than one chapter, if you're making a bigger story, which most of you probably will not at this point, but if you do and you choose to go on to write larger pieces, ending chapters on cliffhangers will make people want to know what happens next. They'll make them want to keep reading. They can be very frustrating at times, and most of modern shows rely on cliffhangers to get you to want to watch the next episode. Um, but they are a really good way of building suspense and making people want to keep going. Here, I put one of the biggest cliffhangers for those of you who've watched Game of Thrones. Season 5 of Game of Thrones ended with Jon Snow getting stabbed. That was a major cliffhanger because we had to wait an entire season to find out whether or not he lived or if he died. So let's put your knowledge to the test. We've talked about the different types of techniques to build suspense. I'll review them really quickly here. There are 10 of them. So the first is just to show both points of view, protagonist and antagonist, to build that dramatic irony. Create a heroic protagonist, make the main character somebody that the readers will root for and identify with. Make them work against a ticking clock. Give them high stakes. Create a dilemma that forces them to choose between their own needs and somebody else's. Pile on the problems or give a contagonist. Give your antagonist the ability to defeat a protagonist. Make the protagonist work against long odds. Let your reader know the protagonist's weakness or fear. Play on universal fears. Kill someone close to the protagonist. And end every chapter on a cliffhanger. Now that you know those, let's take a look at a film where they use multiple techniques. Let's watch it and see if you can identify which suspense building techniques they're using in this film. And here we have a short film called Vacuity, and this is going to use several of the suspense building techniques that I reviewed with you before. Let's take a minute and let's watch this short film and see if you can identify which suspense building techniques they used to build suspense in this film.
Session interrupted. Restoring previous settings. Initializing MMI protocols. 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 Alert! Incoming Priority 1 call.
Alan, it's Mission Control. What just happened up there? We just recovered from an across-the-board comms and data blackout. You're the only person we can get a reading on. What's the status of the crew?
Flight. It looks like an entire system restart. I'm alone in the airlock now. I was just starting the EVA prior to... I don't know, everything just kind of went...
Warning, critical superficial and substructural damage in sections 4, 13, 17, 23. Resuming disrupted decompression sequence. 8 minutes.
Control, are you receiving this?
Roger, Alan. We see what you see. Technical.
This is Technical. Terminate this transmission, log back into your session, and abort that decompression sequence ASAP.
You heard Technical. Call us back when it's canceled.
Copy, Control. Deceased. Unknown. Unknown. What the hell's happening?
Warning, this will end. Error 11323. Error 11323. Error 11323.
This is Flight. Go, Alan.
The abort on decompression failed.
Okay then. Pressurize your suit and wait it out. The airlock will return to equilibrium a few moments after the computer reset.
It's a no-go, Flight. My suit is compromised. Control, when I went to do a restart, the computer gave me an error code. 11323.
One moment. That is a hydraulic failure in your current section.
Solution?
Working on it.
Flight! Be advised the station is severely damaged. If I evac now, separate the airlock from the space station, the countdown will cease, equilibrium will be restored, and I'll have myself a ticket back to Earth.
Absolutely not. If you evacuate now, you leave everyone behind in a failing craft. You have 5 fellow crew members unaccounted for. If you leave, you've got no way out.
How do I know any of them are still alive?
You'll stay on board and get that door to open. That's an order.
Copy. Technical, we're gonna need to force these doors open, and I got less than 6 minutes and 58% breathable atmosphere.
Roger. We have a contingency. Are you facing the monitor?
Yes.
Remove the grid section underneath your right foot. You're looking for a valve labeled hydraulics. Open the panel right below the monitor. You'll need your key.
Okay, I see the valve and I have my keys.
Copy. Once the panel's open, find the flag connection.
I see 2.
You'll need to shock the system. To do so, throw the valve and unplug the bottom wire at the exact same time. That should force the door open.
Should. Copy.
We might enter a comms blackout. Call us once you're on the other side. Good luck.
And if you don't hear from me, excuse me. 3, 2, 1.
Initializing MMI protocols. Initializing MMI protocols. Alert! Initiating evacuation sequence. The following procedure will permanently sever this section from the space station. Continue.
Alan! Alan, are you all right? We're almost there. Just give us 5 minutes.
Alan?
Olivia, honey.
Alan, what's going on? We just talked.
Olivia, I don't have time to go into it. Do you remember what we talked about before I left?
Yes, I remember.
Remember how this station is a lifeline for an entire team of people? You remember how I said everything would be fine?
What are you saying?
Olivia, things went wrong. And it's me or them. Olivia?
I'm here.
Oh, God, I thought I lost you.
And what about your daughter?
I left when Ariel was 1. She doesn't even know who I am.
You're her father. And my husband.
Don't fear goodbyes. Your distance is too great.
You need to come home.
I need you to let me go.
Evacuation cancelled.
And so let's take a look at some of the suspense building techniques that were in Vacuity. The first and probably the most obvious one that you noticed was that 8-minute countdown. And so we know that there's a limited amount of time that this astronaut has to save his own life. And speaking of which, that means it was high stakes. It was life or death. If he succeeded, it would save his life. If he failed, it would mean his death. There were some universal fears in there. Outer space. I don't know about you guys, but that seems terrifying to me. Um, and they also created a dilemma here where he had to choose whether he wanted to survive himself and leave the crew behind and they would end up dying, or if he wanted to sacrifice himself in order to save the remaining crew. And he was kind of a heroic protagonist. He was a father and an astronaut, and he made the choice to sacrifice himself so that his crew could survive. And so let's take a look at one more film. If you see if you can describe the suspense building techniques in this one.
Goodbye, Mommy.
And if we look at the suspense building techniques in the film Cargo that we just watched, you can see similar techniques are going to show up there as well. We saw the 3 hour countdown that the father put on his arm, so we knew he had about 3 hours before he turned into a zombie. Once again, the stakes were very high, life or death of the child that he was carrying. We knew his fate as soon as we saw that he was bit, but it was just a matter of whether or not he could save his child. He was working against long odds too, right? He's in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. He doesn't even know if the place he's going is safe. And there's so many things that could go wrong with carrying the baby to safety, that it's really just long odds that he's even able to get this child somewhere safely. Somebody close to the protagonist died. The wife was dead at the beginning of the movie. And once again, we have a heroic protagonist. And you could even say that there's a universal fear if you consider zombies to be a universal fear. And so we have an assignment here where I'm going to ask you to start writing the beginning and set up a suspenseful narrative using 5 of the suspense building techniques that we discussed. Let's take a closer look at that assignment. Okay, let's take a look at your building suspense assignment. So, the purpose of this is really just to help you make interesting stories that people are going to want to keep reading. And suspense is going to be the way to do that. I've shown you 12 ways to build suspense in your writing, and I want you to use at least 5 of them to write the beginning of a suspenseful story. And so you're going to write a mini narrative where you set up a suspenseful story. I don't really care if you finish the story, just kind of set it up and start building the conflict. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is choose a conflict for your story. What is the thing? What is the problem that's going to occur? Then you want to choose 5 suspense building techniques that you'll use to build the tension in your story. And once you have those, try writing out your story and use those. And if you can, use the other techniques we've talked about, like dialogue, sensory detail, in your writing. But you won't be graded for those. I'm mainly looking for the suspense building techniques. And then when you're done writing, I want you to highlight where did you put those suspense building techniques in your paper. And so if we look at an example here, I said the conflict of this story will be a young man tries to sign up for a limited time offer. I'm going to use the ticking clock, piling on problems, having to choose between his own needs and those of others, giving the protagonist high stakes and working against long odds. And so I wrote out the story here. You can read it if you'd like. And you could see where I did these different things. So where I gave the protagonist high stakes, well, I did that right here. Where's the ticking clock? Well, it's right here. And then again, later on in the narrative down there. And you can see I've shown you kind of where I am doing these things because I want to see that you not only can put these in your writing, but you can identify where you put them. And so this will be your assignment. You're going to write the beginning of a small narrative. Once again, I don't care if you finish the narrative, I just want you to set it up. Really set up that conflict and set up those suspense building techniques to work into your narrative. And so, once again, the options on what you can write about are anything. You don't have to use the same story as me. You can, excuse me, come up with any story you'd like to tell. Just make sure you're working on putting those suspense building techniques into that story. Good luck, and I look forward to seeing what you write.